Shalom, 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 shalom. I'm Moreh Rapha'Yah. Welcome once again to our channel, The Torah Effects. Now, in this time, this occasion, we are about to talk about something very, very important. And this happens to be the day that our Mashiach died in the cross, in the post, and opposed to how you see today now on the popular belief, on the streaming belief, on the Messianic or Christian belief, is not the way it portrays in the Torah. And we will see it today, how you will see with the actual facts. We show you today that there are two calendars, two Pesachs, two Passovers in the time of Mashiach. One that our Mashiach kept, and another that was in the wrong timing, which is the Jewish Babylonian calendar. Now our Mashiach, being here in the first century, his mission was not only to redeem Israel around the world, but also to restore many things. And one of them happens to be the Torah calendar. So let's start off, so we just can cut to the chase. There are two calendars, two Pesachs, and that's what we will see today. And let's start off. Exodus 12 verse 18, beginning the 14th day of the first month, you should eat unleavened bread from evening to the 21st day of the month till evening. Now here our Creator Yahweh gives direct command that these festivals happens to be for 7 days. The first day happens to be a Shabbat, which is a sunset on the 14th, which is already the 15th, till the 21st. The 21st is also considered as a Shabbat or a day of rest. Now, this is what the Torah commands. On the 14th, let's go back over here. The 14th says very clear that between the two evenings, between the evening, that's where they killed the lamb at 3 p.m. Now let's continue. Matthew 26 verse 17. On the first day of the feast of the unleavened, the disciples came to Joshua, saying to him, what do you desire we should prepare for you to eat the Passover or the Pesach? Now, if you notice here, we have to think about it for a moment. If the disciples were confused about the timing, wouldn't they ask our Mashiach, why are we celebrating Passover or Pesach a day before? Think about it for a moment. They did not question him. They actually questioned him, what do you want us, something normal, what do you want us to prepare the Passover, to kill the Passover, to prepare the Pesach, the Seder, which is a nighttime? What do you want us to do it? And our Mashiach told them. So that way it makes us think that for 3 years, because this is the last Pesach, this is the last Passover, for 3 years, our Mashiach was already instructing them the right timing. That's why they never asked for the timing. They asked for the place. Let's continue. Matthew 26 verse 18, and he said, go into the city to a certain one and say to him, our master says, my time has arrived. With you I will prepare the Pesach or the Passover with my disciples. Now, let's think about it for a moment, this text, because this text is very intriguing, very interesting, and because it really reveals a lot of things. First of all, the man that they're supposed to go to was already accord to the Mashiach. Think about it for a moment. If that man where the Mashiach was sending him to was not in accord, with the right timing, wouldn't he allow them to eat the Passover on the wrong time? Of course not. He probably he will probably tell the Sanhedrin. He will probably for sure will report them, including the disciples, to the Sanhedrin, to the Jewish council. But no, he believed that when Mashiach have instructed them, including that man, the right timing. So therefore, we understand that this time was a day before. And not only that, this place where we're going to see next, it happens to be a big, big place. It was an upper room. It was a huge enclosement. And this place happens to fit at least more than 30 people. More than 30 people. Because we have to think about it. The Torah says that the whole family has to keep the Pesach, the Passover. Think about it for a moment. It was the Mashiach, it was his mother, it was the other woman, it was their disciples, it was their families and the kids. It was that man. Let's go back and read it for yourself. It says, Master says, my time has arrived. With you, I will prepare the Passover. With you, I will eat the Passover with my disciples. In other words, it wasn't just the disciples. It was that man, whoever was the owner of that place, his family. So think about it for a moment. It was more than 30 people. So, and there is a reason why we strongly believe that our Mashiach made this happen. And the reason for it is because he wanted to have as many witnesses as possible to witness this, so people in the future would not make this think, oh, he made it up. No, there was a lot of witnesses that they witnessed this Pesach, this last Pesach with the disciples. It's very important for us to understand the little details about the scriptures. Not only that, as I mentioned in the previous, this is part 2, by the way, part 2 of 6 days before the Passover. This is the second part, and here we are going to see few differences from one another, which is 2 calendars, 2 Passovers. Let's continue. Matthew 26, verse 20. Even in the evening, having come, he reclined with the disciples. If you notice here, brothers and sisters, we are actually reading the text itself, and we are deciphering the text as it comes alive. Something very important here. When he is already eating with the disciples, remember it was a 14 where they killed the lamb at 3 p.m. Here in this verse, let's go back, it says it was the evening already. The evening has already come. And he reclined with the disciples. That means it was already the 15th of Aviv. Remember, it's sundown to sundown every day. If you want to know where it is, it's in the book of Bereshit, or Genesis chapter 1. And also you can read it on Vayikra or Leviticus 23. And there's so many more. In Nehemiah, the book of Nehemiah, on the last book, in the last chapter, you're going to see that it says very clear it was already sunset before the Shabbat. So in other words, it was already Friday, if you really think about it nowadays. So knowing all this details, we also see something very important, and we can pretty much see the custom, how they eat the meals at that particular time. They don't eat like chairs. They were not using chairs. They were literally on the floor reclining themselves. And because that was the Hebrew way to do things. See, we're not here in America, we're not accustomed, we're not used to that kind of Eastern custom. And the reason for it is because that's the way the Western Roman mind has been inclined for us for many centuries. So we think, when we see these texts, we think it's weird, but it's not. That was the way it's supposed to be. Let's continue. Leviticus 23, or Vayikra 23, verse 5. In the first month, on the 14th of the month, between the evenings is Pesach, Passover to Yahweh. If you notice here, once again, that 14 between the two evenings, that's what is called when they do the shechita. The shechita is basically where they kill the Pesach, or the lamb, in other words. Now that's where the preparation is. That's another word that we'll see next. That's the word for preparation. But also you have to understand that preparation, or where they kill the lamb at 3 p.m., and also the evening when the sun already have set, is the seder, which is the meal itself. Two different times, as we mentioned before. If you notice here, and now let's look at the graphic. As I mentioned before, this year, 2024, fall exactly as the way it was. It happens every 4 years, by the way, because the Tekufot, the every 4 years, right? We can see pretty much here that on Tuesday, which happens to be the third day of the week, which is what they call it Tuesday, it fall on the 14th of Abib. If you see below on green, it was the 13th of Nisan. It was a day of difference with each other. One is the new moon, right? And the other one is the Tekufot, which is the calendar of Yahweh. Our Mashiach needed to fulfill the Torah to the fullest. That's why if you go to Matthew, if you read very clear, 5:17 says very clear, I did not come to abolish the Torah. I came to fulfill the Torah. So if you notice how our Mashiach fulfilled the Torah to the letter, think about it for a moment. If he would not eaten of the Pesach, the Seder, he would not fulfill as a Mashiach, the Israel. He needed to fulfill every single tittle of the Torah in order for him to be the Mashiach. So it is very important for us to understand that this concept, we have to understand how it works in such a way that our Mashiach fulfilled to the letter all this. So it's something that we have to think about it for a moment. Our Mashiach is a true Mashiach, fulfilling every single tittle of the Torah. Now, if you notice here the preparation, where as we read earlier on the text, it says very clear that they ask him, where do you want us to prepare the Seder, right? We prepare the Seder, which is prepare the Pesach, which they kill exactly, if you notice here, they prepare at 3 p.m. They kill the lamb at 3 p.m. Not at night time, as we mentioned before, that's where they eat in the Passover, which is the Passover Seder or Seder. At night time, it was already dark. It was already the 15th of Abib, which is the 14th of Nisan. You see the two difference here, and we'll see it next on the text very, very shortly. So here we can see pretty much that our Mashiach is fulfilling to the letter every single tittle of the Torah. Now we're going to see next on the 15th what happens. But let's continue. Mark 14:12. And on the first day of the unleavened bread, when they killed the Pesach or the Passover, his disciples said to him, where did he desire to go in? We may prepare you to eat the Passover. You see that? Very, very not weird, okay, but very interesting, because it was the first day of the unleavened bread. Now think about it for a moment. It wasn't the next day, the 14th of Nisan, as we see before. Let's go back over here. If it was here, the 14th of Aviv, our Mashiach will be already on the cross. Think about it for a moment. So it had to be the previous day, which is the 14th of Aviv. You see that? Which is the 13th of Nisan. Do you understand what I'm saying? So in other words, it was the first day of the unleavened bread, which is a nighttime. Do you see that? Already the Torah was already yielding that this concept was already in their minds, and our Mashiach is fulfilling this. The disciples are fulfilling this because he's already instructing them the right way to do it. Let's go to the next one. And we see a hallmark, a middle point. Where do we know where the Mashiach was crucified? Daniel 9:27. And he should confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. In the middle of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the offering to cease. If you notice here, it says the middle of the week. Think about it for a moment. When is the beginning of the week? If it says it's the middle of the week, when is the beginning of the week? It's Yom Rishon. Yom Rishon, it happens to be what they call it commonly today, Sunday. Sunday is the first day of the week. Now, if you count 7 days, the middle of the week happens to be, guess what? Wednesday. So our Mashiach definitely died on the 15th of Aviv, which we're going to be seeing next, 14th of Nisan. And the question is, why the 15th, our Mashiach died? There's a great reason why, and we'll see it next. Luke 23:54, and the day was setting, and the Shabbat was approaching. The day was setting, and the Shabbat was approaching. Why? We'll see it next. If you notice here, brothers and sisters, this is the time that this verse is speaking of. Okay? Remember this, that the 15 is already considered Shabbat. So if you really think about it, there were 2 Shabbats. And let's go back to the graphic. This 15 is already considered a Shabbat according to Leviticus 23. The first day is considered Shabbat, and the last day with the 21 of Aviv is considered Shabbat. So there were 2 festival high Shabbats here, the 15th of Aviv and the 15th of Nisan, according to their calendar, quote unquote. Okay, their calendar. But the true Shabbat was the 15th of Aviv, according to the Torah calendar. Now let's continue. Matthew 3:15, and I want you to read this verse because so we can grasp the validity of the how Mashiach fulfilled to the letter. But answering, Yahushua said to him, allow it now, for it is proper to us this way to fulfill all tzedakah. Tzedakah means all righteousness. Then he allowed him. What are we seeing here? Remember that he didn't want to do the tevilah or the immersion to the Mashiach, John the immerser. Remember that? Is because how could he, right? Because he was he lowered himself. He said, why should I do it? You should do it to me. But the Mashiach said, you need to fulfill all righteousness. You need to do it the way it's supposed to be done, which is you to me. The same thing here. Our Mashiach, if he was telling this to Yohanan, John the immerser, much more, he needed to fulfill to the letter everything that our Father have instructed him to do so. Book of Acts 3:21, whom heavenly truly needs to receive unto the fullness of the times of all things, of which Yahweh spoke through the mouth of his Kadosh prophets, or set apart prophets from old. Why did I bring this verse? Is because our Mashiach came to start off the restoration of all things. The first century, our Mashiach came to fulfill, came to restore the name of the Father. Remember that in the first century, they did not mention or invoke the name of Yahweh. They actually say Hashem. They actually say Elohim. They actually say other names except for Yahweh's name. It was forbidden. And just so you know, as a parenthesis, as a small note for you to write down, do you know one of the reasons why the Mashiach was crucified? One, not the only. One of the reasons is because he mentioned the name of Yahweh in front of the Sanhedrin. Read it for yourself whenever you have time. So, we go back over here. Our Mashiach became the restoration of all things. We, Ephraim, need to finish up the restoration of all things. How do I mean by all this? By restoring the name of Yahweh, by restoring the name of Mashiach, which is Yahushua or Yeshua, and by restoring the timing, the Torah calendar. It is super important for us to understand these facts nowadays that we're living the last generation nowadays. Let's go back. John 11:55. Now read it for yourself. And the Pesach, or the Passover of the Jews, was near. And many went up to Jerusalem out of the country before the Pesach, that they might purify themselves. Two important things. Pesach of the Jews. Think about it for a moment. The writer happens to be a Jew. Our Mashiach happens to be a Jew, from the line of Judah, right? Another time we'll talk about that, the northern and the southern kingdom. But here we notice, and let's go back, it says, the writer states very clear, and it was the Passover or the Pesach or the Yehudim. Why does it need to say that? The reason for it, brothers and sisters, is because it needs to make a difference between one calendar and the other calendar. Remember, he knows, the writer knows, Yohanan, he knows that the Mashiach came to restore the Torah calendar. Why does he need to say that phrase, the Pesach or the Passover of the Yehudim or the Jews? Why? And the reason for it is because we need to make a difference between one and another. Remember that the festivals of Yahweh are his festivals. Nobody, not even you and me or anybody or the president or the prime minister or even the Pope, cannot take ownership of something that does not belong to them or to us. It belongs to Yahweh Sebaot. It belongs to our Father. Leviticus, Wayikra 23, read it for yourselves. Yahweh says, these are my festivals. It doesn't say these are the festivals of the Jews. It doesn't say that. It says very clear, these are the Pesach of the Jews, which means that there were two calendars. Another thing, let's go back over here, and below it says they came to purify themselves. What do you think is that? It was the immersion. Every festival we need to do immersion to purify ourselves. That's a very Hebrew custom, and not something that the Messianics or the Christians invented. This is something that our forefathers were doing for many years, even before the first century. So we have to understand, we have to put in our minds that this is not something new. Our forefathers already knew this. They've done this before. So it's nothing, something new. Let's go to John 2:13. Look at what it says again. And the Pesach of the Jews was near. Do you see that? We understand once again, now we realize that there were two calendars. Now we realize our Mashiach was fulfilling to the letter the Torah calendar. And in between was the Jewish calendar. You see that? Let's continue. Luke 22 verse 7. And the day of the 11 came, in which the Passover must be slaughtered. Now, once again, we see here that this festival came near, and the Passover needed to be killed, to be slaughtered, and all they needed to be fulfilled to the letter, so the Mashiach can fulfill what he is. Now let's go into the Wednesday the 15th. Wednesday the 15th, our Mashiach, he is on the stake or on the cross from 9 a.m. all the way to 3 p.m., 6 hours hanging on the stake. At 12 to 3 was darkness. At 3 p.m., our Mashiach dies. Something else happened on the 15th. Remember, he died on the 15th of Abib, 14th of Nisan. What happens on at 3 p.m.? Not only the Mashiach dies, not only the Mashiach gave his life for all of us, but also something else happened. Let's find out. Leviticus 23 verse 10. Speak to the sons of Israel and shall say to them, when you come into the land which I am giving to you, I have reaped its harvest and have brought into the Omer in the beginning of the harvest to the priest, to the Kohen Hagadol. Now the Kohen Hagadol needed to get all these Omer. By the way, if you guys don't know what Omer means, Omer happens to be the word for measurement, which happens to be some kind of a vessel, okay? Some kind of a measurement that they took, and that's where they put the grain. Either it was the barley or the wheat, either or corn. But in this case was the barley. The barley need to cut it first in order for them to bring it to the priest. But what time did they did this? Let's continue. Leviticus 23 verse 11. Then he shall weigh the Omer before Yahweh for your acceptance. On the morrow of the Shabbat, the priest shall weigh it. Once again, when did this happen? This happened when? I'm asking to all of you, when did this happen? This happens to be on the 16th of Abib. Remember, and let's go back over here. It says, on the morrow of the day, on the morrow of the Shabbat, the priest shall weigh it. Why? Because it needed to be after the Shabbat. After the Shabbat, the priest came and weighed it. He weighed the Omer on the that was when it was already dark, which happens to be the 16th of Abib. That was the beginning of the counting of the Omer. Remember, it's 7 weeks. 7 times 7 is 49. The following day is Shavuot, or the feast of the weeks. Here is the beginning of the counting of the Omer. Now, but let's go back up a little bit. What happens before that? Let's continue. And I want you to see this so you can see on the graphic very clear that here on the 16th, I'm showing you with the laser the 16th of Abib. Okay, the 16th of Abib happens to be the time where the priests needed to wave that Omer, and that Omer happens to be the beginning of the counting of the 49 days. Now, I'm going to show you once again. If you notice here, brothers and sisters, here before on the 15th of Abib, people went outside on the fields of where the barley was, and they needed to cut the barley exactly at 3 p.m. They needed to cut it at 3 p.m. At nighttime here, this is the first where you see the arrow here at 3 p.m. That's where they cut the barley, but at nighttime, that's where they brought it to the priest. So at nighttime, that's where they wave it. Happens to be the 16th, the beginning of the counting of the Omer. It is super interesting because our Mashiach fulfilled to the letter the Torah. At the same time, the barley was cut. at the same time his life was already cut as well. You don't believe me? Let's continue with the text. Look at what it says, Devarim, or Deuteronomy 16:9. And you shall number to yourselves 7 weeks when the sickle begins to tachel. Tachel means to cut in the standing grain. Do you see that? That means they needed to go outside and cut the barley. And the word is tachel. They needed to cut it. What time was this? Find it for yourself. Google it. You'll find out that in the first century, even before that, when the Beit HaMikdash or the Mikdash or the temple was standing, they needed to go outside at 3 p.m., cut with the sickle the barley, and at nighttime they needed to bring it to the priest, the Kohen HaGadol, and that was already the 16th, and that's where the Omer came. He needed to wave it, of course, and that's where the beginning of the Omer came. Our Mashiach fulfilled to the letter all these prophecies. Now, let's continue. I want you to see something very important. 23 verse 15 of Leviticus. And you should number to you for your next day after the Shabbat. You see that? For the day you should bring the shift into the wave offering, it should be complete 7 Shabbats. You see that? For the next day after the Shabbat. Let's go back over here. This happens to be a Shabbat. You see that? The 15th of Abib happens to be Shabbat. After the Shabbat is already at nighttime, is already the 16th of Abib. The word that you see here is halal. Halal means to begin, to dissolve, to break, to cut. This applies to the Mashiach because here, and we almost closing, Isaiah or Yeshayahu 53 verse 5, but he was mecholal. Mecholal means, and he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. If you notice here, brothers and sisters, our Mashiach fulfilled to the letter the Torah. Our Mashiach fulfilled the letter every single title of the Torah. Our Mashiach is the true Mashiach of Israel. He came to die for Israel, for all of us around the world. It is important for us to acknowledge his blood. It is important to acknowledge what he done for all of us. It's important for us to acknowledge what he has done for so many centuries until now. I don't understand why many Messianic places, they don't acknowledge our Mashiach in the Seder. They should. It is a shame, to be honest with you, they do not acknowledge this in the Seder. We happens to be, he's in it. He commanded us to do so. In another time, we'll talk about that. Shalom, shalom, brothers and sisters. If you want to follow more of our productions, please subscribe so you can see many productions that we are giving the teaching, but we are also making videos, very high level productions, so you guys can enjoy, instruct in the Torah. I'm Moreh Rapha'Yah, and until next time, shalom, shalom.